On November 26, at Chowk, Islamabad, in the middle of the night, the Pakistani army opened fire on peaceful PTI protesters in Pakistan, conducting a brutal onslaught, killing seemingly hundreds of people and injuring many more. Security forces also arrested thousands of the demonstrators. The full scale of the bloodshed is still an ongoing development, as it's being covered up and pushed under the rug by the Pakistani military, the media, and the West. There are reports of the army hiding and even burying the bodies themselves shortly after the killings. This horrendous event has been dubbed the Islamabad Massacre and resembles some of the worst military crackdowns on protesters in history, such as Tiananmen Square or the Rabah Massacre in Egypt. There are many reasons why you may not have heard about it, but for my mostly American audience, it's because our country and current administration supports this extreme army regime in Pakistan against the will of the majority of Pakistani people. So there is little to no reporting of it, and if there is, it's mainly regurgitated propaganda aimed at reinforcing military state narratives. This massacre should be brought to light and the perpetrators held accountable. For context, Pakistan is the fifth most populous country in the world, with a population of about 240 million people, 60% of whom are under the age of 30. It's also a nuclear-armed state, with an army of around 700,000 active personnel. Since gaining independence in 1947, the military has directly ruled the country for a collective 30 years. And in the periods between military rule, they still exerted extreme influence through the use of puppet governments. Pakistan has received tens of billions of dollars in aid from the United States, which especially ramped up in the Cold War, during which Pakistan was the second largest recipient of US aid behind only Israel. However, much of this aid was diverted to enrich military generals and corrupt politicians, most notably General Bajwa, whose family's net worth skyrocketed to around 57 million US dollars. Meanwhile, Pakistan's per capita income remains the lowest in South Asia, a region already home to some of the world's poorest nations. Over a third of workers in Pakistan earn less than $4 per day. PTI stands for Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, or Pakistan Movement for Justice, and is the political party of ex-Prime Minister of Pakistan Imran Khan. After multiple assassination attempts on his life, Khan has been unjustly held in jail for over a year now on bogus charges. In February, Khan won from jail, sweeping a 2/3 majority in the elections. This was while his entire party was banned from using their symbol or name. This means that everyone in every jurisdiction that won for PTI ran as independents with random symbols and affiliations. Despite winning in an overwhelming manner from his jail cell, the army rigged the election and stole the mandate from the voters in Pakistan. This was wild to see in real time, as Khan's stunning victory was being reported all over Western media, but when I congratulated some people I know that support him, they literally laughed and said, just wait till tomorrow. And then tomorrow came, and they were right. This happened just 1 month after Bangladesh held illegitimate elections, and the United States condemned them openly and vehemently. Then Bangladesh had a revolution, and the US supported it. So surely the same would happen for Pakistan, right? Wrong. The US hypocritically supported the rigged elections, pushed it under the rug, and, to the best of its abilities, continued to kill any sense of true revolution in Pakistan. It became clear that the US supports what is, by all accounts, a fascist regime. The amount of censorship that those critical of the army in Pakistan are being subjected to is beyond concerning. Censorship of what one can access and what one can say or post about online. As of yesterday, December 2nd, a draconian amendment was proposed in Parliament which elevates the sharing of fake news, the definition of which is determined by the current regime, to be an unbailable offense, punishable by fines up to 1 million rupees and or up to 5 years in jail. It also expands the definition of social media within the law to include even accessing certain platforms and the use of tools to do so, potentially criminalizing the use of things like VPNs. Whether through threats to people speaking out or their families, including kidnappings, in this moment there is no semblance of freedom of speech in Pakistan. For this video, I interviewed a number of people currently living in Pakistan. In order to protect their identities, their faces have been blurred and their voices have been changed.
Everything has been like they want to control everything. X has been completely banned. WhatsApp is being closely monitored. Your chats and what you're talking about with any of your personal contacts.
It is also our right to have internet or access to social media, access to other media channels, but no, nothing. All those channels are in control of the government and upper authority.
Just doing it, it's not a crime. But if you speak about it, it's the biggest crime of the century you have ever done. I think speaking against something is the biggest crime in Pakistan right now.
Now, all that being said, the people of Pakistan didn't just surrender their mandate over, and the disputed subjects of Khan's imprisonment and rightfully elected majority were not going to be put to rest so easily. Leading up to the Islamabad Massacre, many protests were held. One such protest was held on October 4th, but this one was sabotaged by moles from within the PTI leadership. The moles abandoned the protest and left the remaining protesters to face the power of the state in the form of rubber bullets and tear gas, resulting in the protests being cut short. But no one could predict what would come just a month later. After being given the orders under Article 245, in the middle of the night, the army shut off all sources of light, cut the internet, and unloaded live rounds at peaceful protesters, slaughtering them in the process. The state is hiding bodies and pressuring hospitals and journalists to deny that even a single person was killed through intimidation, kidnappings, and threats of facing a similar fate to those already slaughtered.
I'm scared for my family and for my future. I mean, if people start complaining, they try to control them, they try to repress their voices. They started arresting different people whenever a person wanted to raise voice, they will arrest him or his family.
They knock upon the door of a home and ask them to give us some meal. We want to eat. After 2 days, the military came in and they said, "Oh, you have given the meal to terrorists." Although they were belonging to the military. They will create a problem for you. When you say something, they will declare you as a terrorist, and your plaza or your multi-story building is gone. It will be under their control. Even if they like a home, a house which is a very good place and belongs to just a public person, they will try to take over it. I mean, it's like a robbery.
The brutal military opened live fire at groups on the ground and even used snipers on their own people. Senior PTI leader Umar Ayub Khan reported in a press conference that the weapons used in this massacre were the Remington 700 and the M60, both of which are American-made. These weapons were given to the Pakistani army by America to assist the Pakistani security forces in fighting against terrorism. Instead, they were used to kill their own people who were peacefully protesting. In addition to all those killed and injured by the army, up to thousands more have been arrested. This is abuse by the state and quite literally terrorism. The Guardian reported that doctors at hospitals in Islamabad said they had received multiple patients with gunshot wounds. The Guardian witnessed at least 5 patients with bullet wounds in one hospital, which was surrounded by police. A doctor who was on duty in the emergency ward on Tuesday night said he had treated more than 40 injured patients, several of whom had been shot. At least 7 have died and 4 are in critical condition in the hospital, he said. 8 more have been admitted to the hospital with bullet wounds. Another doctor, speaking to the BBC on condition of anonymity for fear of retribution, said that he had never performed so many surgeries in a single night as he did the night of the massacre. Some of the injured came in such critical condition that we had to start surgeries before we could even wait for them to be anesthetized. There were many patients who had lost a lot of blood, another doctor at the polyclinic said. We had such a rush that we did 2 surgeries on one bed. I will never forget what I saw here that night. The Minister for Information and Broadcasting, Atta Tarar, said there had been no firing on PTI protesters and no fatalities. The Interior Minister, Mohsin Naqvi, said in a statement that officers had bravely repulsed the protesters. However, there's overwhelming evidence that this is not the case, that they are lying. Along with deaths and bullet wounds confirmed by video footage taken inside and outside of hospitals, there's currently a massive list of missing persons, with more names being added to it every day. As of today, December 4th, PTI chairman Gohar Khan revealed that there are over 5,000 PTI workers missing 8 days after the massacre. No one knows if they are dead or alive. Polyclinic, after sharing a list which clearly indicated a number of deaths and almost 30 injuries from gunshot wounds, later put on their website that there weren't actually any gunshot wounds, and anyone saying otherwise was spreading fake news. In the early morning hours after the massacre, the roads were hosed off to remove any blood left over from the slain protesters, and thousands of bullets and bullet casings were also removed, to make it seem like the massacre never happened.
The same night, they cleaned everything, removed anything that was there. Again, evidence can be used, collected against them. They were not even returning the bodies. So it went to that level. This is why probably mainstream media or even international media might not catch up. But people on ground here see everything. Maybe there are few videos or evidence that might come out, but probably, a lot of things where they basically vanished, they cleaned everything. It's more or less a massacre.
A cover-up of this magnitude is shameless, despicable, and unacceptable in any circumstance. Here's a video of an army ranger from the Islamic Republic of Pakistan surrounded by 3 other rangers pushing a praying Muslim man off of a stack of cargo crates, which is a 25-foot drop. This is cold-blooded attempted murder by the state of its own population with their bare hands. A regime capable of this is capable of anything.
It's a treacherous massacre done by the people to the people who love them. It's more than massacre to me. Nobody opens fire on their own public.
There are countless videos of the brutality inflicted by the army towards its own people, making the outright denial by the state a complete joke. Historically, there is well-documented evidence of the army's brutality, and it was always supported by the US. Even today, terrible things done by the army are the norm in places like Balochistan and KPK.
Because army has been doing this in Balochistan for decades. They have been killing their own citizens, picking them up, kidnapping them, and they're disappeared for years. The whole international media and human rights organizations are reporting on it, but nothing has happened.
In the past year, many of you in my audience have watched the Israeli military lie time and time again to cover up the countless atrocities they've committed. Hopefully the parallels here of state propaganda are clear.
For a Western audience to understand, the Pakistani army is unique among militaries. It's a powerful institution with influence nearly in every sector. They're a corporate conglomerate owning from cereal to cheese. They own land, influence media and judiciary, prime ministers, even cricket. They're not like the IDF in the sense that the IDF and Mossad kind of function independently even though they're in collaboration. The Pakistani army and ISI are like two sides of the same coin. Pakistani army has too much influence over the ISI, to put it lightly, to compare them to Mossad and IDF. The Pakistan army and ISI are kind of like a sophisticated deep state kind of institution themselves, functioning as the de facto government at times. For decades, this institution has been loved by many Pakistanis, especially in Punjab, as kind of a savior from corrupt politicians. But this perception has changed dramatically, particularly after the events of November 26th. To understand the army's actions and psyche, you kind of have to understand why they view Imran Khan as an existential threat. It's not just about him as a person, it's probably a lot less than people think. It's the idea he represents, which is democracy. More importantly, it's a challenge to the army's entrenched power and authority, their privilege even. There's simply too much for the army to lose for them in terms of power, individual lifestyles, and authority. Imran Khan's rise and his message of democratic accountability threatened the institution that has long controlled the country's narrative and reaped enormous benefits from it. The army's response, violence and suppression, is an attempt to silence not just Imran Khan, but the idea of democracy itself. But the thing is, ideas are not people. You can't arrest or kill them. So suppressing democracy only makes the idea stronger, and for the first time, public sentiment has turned against the armies in ways that they've never faced before. The more they fight the idea, the more they risk losing the very admiration and support that has kept them powerful.
The will of the Pakistani people has been crushed by the state in this brutality, along with whatever positive or even neutral associations they may have had towards the army. This horrific event will have severe consequences going forward, there's no question about that. This can and likely will result in an uptick in recruitment to anti-state terrorism groups like the Pakistani Taliban or TTP and other prominent anti-army militias. The United States' lack of attention to this issue and enabling of the military's oppressive actions has the potential to undercut domestic security as well.
Because we want to keep this, country peaceful for the sake of Pakistan, for the sake of our nations here in the West also. Because we don't want another 9/11. We don't want another, Talibanization or another ISIS. That will happen in the next 20 years if it is not stopped. So unfortunate that the US State Department should have issued a statement because, it's so disturbing that no statement from the State Department till now, and then they continue to be quiet and mum on all the human rights abuses that has been happening at the hands of army towards the innocent civilians for the last 2 years. And if Western countries, especially US, have spoken against that and held these generals accountable, it could have prevented this massacre that happened on 26th November.
It also resulted in more violence being inflicted upon civilians in future protests, the worst case scenario of this violence being, due to the complexities of Pakistan's geography and population split, an outright civil war.
For me, the path forward is clear for Pakistan. Democracy must prevail, and not just for the people, but for the survival of the army as a legitimate institution. Without that, both the army and the nation face an uncertain future. In my opinion, the army is acting against their own interests severely on a daily basis.
Alright everyone, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. This video was made in collaboration with Sahil at Sawboy on YouTube, who helped with writing the script and gathering sources. Go check out his channel. It's a great channel. Also, there's a Drive folder linked in the description which contains documentation of all the atrocities committed by the Pakistani military last week. It'd be a shame if these files were downloaded by the people in my audience before the folder gets deleted by the authorities. And one last thing, any revenue earned on this video will be donated to support victims of the massacre. I'll post an update on that on my community tab in the next month or so. All right, see you guys on the next one. Bye.